You're muted, Taras, if you're talking to us.
Sorry, I didn't see I'm mute. Thank you. Thank you for pointing me to this. Okay, I said I have to start with an apology because I think I misinformed you yesterday about the number of the psalm, and I hope you read the good one because actually it's number 18 in the Greek numbering and number 19 in the Hebrew. And the psalm I meant is the one that starts with the heavens that declare the glory of God. Is that the one you read or not? Okay, anyway, we will go through it in detail today, so I hope you will be fine with that. Okay, so let me read the psalm as always in this translation I am using. You are welcome to use other translations, and we will see some differences today also in Greek text and Hebrew text, and pay attention to them. So Psalm 18, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims the work of his hands. Day unto day pours forth speech, and night unto night proclaims knowledge. There are no tongues nor words in which their voices are not heard. Their sound has gone forth into all the earth, and their words into the ends of the world. In the sun has he set his tabernacle, and he, like a bridegroom, coming forth from his chamber, will rejoice like a giant to run his course. From the uttermost border of heavens in his going forth, and his goal is unto the outermost part of heaven, and there shall no man hide himself from his heat. The law of the Lord is blameless, converting souls. The testimony of the Lord is trustworthy, bringing wisdom to infants. The statutes of the Lord are upright, gladdening the heart. The commandment of the Lord is far shining, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever and ever. The judgments of the Lord are true, altogether justified. More to be desired than gold, and much precious stone, and sweeter than honey and the honeycomb. For your servant keeps them. In keeping them there is much reward. As for transgressions, who will understand them? From my secret sins cleanse me, and from those of others spare your servant. If they have not dominion over me, then blameless shall I be, and I shall be cleansed from great sin. And the sayings of my mouth shall be to your good pleasure, and the meditation of my heart shall be before you forever, O Lord, my helper and redeemer. So this is the psalm, and as you can see immediately from the asterisk I put here, it has normally is divided into 3 or sometimes even 4 parts, because in some editions the last sentence starting and the saying of my mouth is considered to be like the final small part that summarizes the psalm. We will speak further about this structure and this division, why it is so, but you can also see from the immediate reading of the psalm that it switches the imagery and the tone and the topic it is speaking about rather strongly. So in the first part you have this cosmic panorama of the heaven proclaiming the glory of God, and the sun triumphantly going through the sky. In the second part you have a complete change of topic to the law of God, and then you have even one more change to a question of sin, transgression, and innocence. There are different speculations of scholars about that, and as always we will start with historical context that might explain us something about the structure and content of this psalm. Well, and this time it will be very brief because sometimes I speak about historical context at a great length because sometimes the text of the psalm displays clear signs of being a part of something else, a liturgical ceremony or like a royal ceremony like Psalm 2 or something. But here the answer is very clear. The historical context is absolutely unclear. And I have read a number of commentaries on this psalm, and each of them says either we know nothing about the context or they try to propose some theories that are just wild guesses. Some people say that perhaps psalm is actually an joining of together of two or even three older compositions. That one composition, this cosmic one, the first one, can be actually by David, maybe even, and to support thesis, they say that David was half Hebrew, half part of his heritage came from Canaan, and that in this representation of the heavens and especially of the sun, we can see some common Canaanite language and mythology that is generally common to the Near East, and that might be the sign that actually David wrote it. And of course, it's a very weak presupposition because there is nothing specifically Davidic in this language. Of course, it's common Near Eastern and rather archaic language and cosmology, but then other scholars would go ahead and say, oh, it's probably Solomon who wrote it because we know that at Solomon's court there were representatives of different Near Eastern nations, and the influences of Near Eastern mythology were much stronger at Solomon's time than at David's, and so on. It's of course it's sheer speculation, but what can be said with a high degree of certainty is that there are certain strata in this psalm, certain layers. Some of them are older and much more common to the Near Eastern worldview, and some are specifically Israelite. And the second part, speaking of the law of God, Torah, is certainly very Israelite, very Mosaic, and perhaps very, very much I don't want to say Pharisaic because it's too early for Pharisees, but this kind of scribes and scholars of the books of the Bible, they come to the fore somewhere in the post-exilic time in around 4th century BC. After Israel returned from Babylonia and settled and rebuilt the city walls of Jerusalem and the temple, so Ezra and Nehemiah time, and that might be the period when they took this first half of Psalm 18, this older composition, and joined it to the hymn for Torah. So there are two hymns: for the creation, that is the silent witness, for the sky and the sun, so on, that are silent witnesses of God's power and wisdom. And then they shift the perspective to the book and to the law of God that is more humane and more Israelite, specifically Israelite dimension of God's revelation, not cosmic, not universal, but book and the cult of the Second Temple. Again, these are just suggestions by different scholars, but to make sense of that, we could look with more precision at the structure and images of the psalm. These three parts can be actually three completely different, or at least two completely different compositions that were joined by the redactors, by the editors, after the Babylonian captivity, as I have just described. Or otherwise, we should not depreciate the genius of biblical poetry. And if the mode switches dramatically in the center of the poem, it does not necessarily mean that there were two authors and that these are two different poems joined to each other. There might actually be just a sign of creativity of the biblical author who originally wrote this psalm as one single composition. And he simply just wanted to emphasize that, yes, on the one hand, we have this imagery of the cosmic magnitude, and on the other side or other hand, we have this imagery of the book of the law of God that makes people wise. And then at the end, the modality changes again, and we have a prayer by this pious person to ask him to make him clean, pure before God, and keep him wise and innocent. So this can be just three literary modes of expression, and there is no way of knowing that for sure from the present text. So these three parts or three themes of the Psalms are as follows. Verses 1 and 6, as you have seen, are this kind of cosmic hymn in the center of which are heavens and the sun. And this hymn represents the greatness of creation and the magnificence of creation that is so powerful that it penetrates everything. The vision of creation, its silent witness to the glory of God, penetrates everything as the heat of the sun, especially in the Near East, penetrates to every human being, to every living creature. Then the second part is verses 7 to 10. These are the hymn to the law of God, to the Torah. And then the summary, 11 to 14, represent a certain understanding of human sin and innocence in the language of prayer. So it's not just a reflection on sin and innocence, but it's a prayer to avoid the first and to have the latter. There are three key images in this psalm. Speech, so sound, an image of the sound with which the psalm starts and at which we will look more closely just now. Then there is a second powerful image of light and transparency to that light. And the psalm ends with a third striking, not so much an image, but a term that is very prominent in the Bible. It's a Hebrew term that is hard to translate. In the modern languages, it's goel. It's usually translated as redeemer, and the verb root connected with this goel is translated as to redeem or sometimes to save. But actually, it's for us it doesn't almost mean anything. Like redeemer is just maybe a standard title for Jesus in the church language, but otherwise it's not very. We don't understand what it means actually to redeem. And in order to understand that, we should look a little bit in the Near Eastern Hebrew. Excuse me, please, for a second. We should look at the Near Eastern and Hebrew connotations of that word. So, as you know, it was a tribal or clannish society where the only social guarantees people had were based on their social ties with close relatives, with people who were mutually supportive to each other. And Goel is like close relative, like someone who is taking care of you if you get into trouble. It's I would say it's something similar if in the modern times, if you are traveling and you are like applying for visa or so, well, you Americans never apply for visa, but we do a lot. And you are traveling somewhere and you are filling in like a document, and you have to state like the closest kin to whom they have to contact in case you are in trouble, you have health issues or anything. So you put usually, I don't know, husband would put his wife, or vice versa, or the closest relative who would take care of you if you need that. So that's the primary meaning of Goel. And another nuance of that meaning is that in the ancient society, um, the troubles were much more serious than usually we have. So if you get into trouble, means you are taken by enemies as a captive or as a slave, or you are being sold as a slave because of your debts, or someone from your family is sold for debts, or for example you are killed, and then this Goel has to take care of your family and has to avenge your death by blood revenge. So it was a very functional and a very strong thing in the ancient civilizations. And if you were, for example, taken into captivity by enemies or sold as a slave, Goel was supposed to buy you off with his own money or possessions to set you free, because he's kind of responsible for you and he can count on your help if he needs that. And imagine, this is a very courageous claim to call God by this. It means, God, you are our guarantor. You are our the closest relative. You are so kin to us, so close to us, that we rely on you completely. You almost have like obligation to save us because you promised that. Um, and this is the term that summarizes the psalm, and we will look at that again a bit further. Um, it's also important to note that the psalm is quite universalistic, although it has this part about the law of Moses. It doesn't mention Moses, but still it's the Torah of Israel. But in its overall character, the psalm is very universalistic, something that we mentioned when we spoke yesterday about the similar psalm of the hymn of creation, right? The Psalm 8, which we analyzed in the previous lecture, was also referring to the creation of God, to the world that is created for human beings. And it also had this universalistic character in it, that the whole humanity is invited to worship God for his creation, because the creation is obvious, is visible to everyone. It doesn't take to be a Jew, part of the Mosaic covenant, to see the greatness and wisdom and beauty of God from the created world. And here is the same spirit. It has the striking feature. This psalm has the striking feature that it actually quotes from some Egyptian psalm hymns. I was even tempted to give the exact quotation, but it's long. I don't want to do that. But we are lucky to actually have this hymn from ancient Egypt addressed to the sun god. It's somehow survived, and the scholars, when they deciphered it from the Egyptian hieroglyphs and read it, they said, well, we have already heard this somewhere. And then, yeah, this parallel with Psalm 18 was established. It's almost not word by word, but it's very close literally what is said in the psalm in this psalm in verses 4 to 6 about the sun having its tabernacle in the heavens and going through the heavens like a powerful warrior or a bridegroom. There are many parallels. And also they say, I didn't see that text, but they say there are some parallels in some Babylonian hymns, which is not surprising, because it seems that it is a common Near Eastern motive, for one thing, and also the intent of the biblical author of this psalm was to give the witness that would be understood to all peoples, or the one that comes from the sources familiar to many peoples. And that would be completely in accordance, completely in agreement with the text of the psalm that speaks about the witness of the heavens that is heard among all the peoples to the ends of the earth. Also, this strange or striking, should I say, universalistic general character of this psalm is evident from the use of the word for God at the beginning. So, glory of God. So, heavens are proclaiming the glory of God, and the name that is used here is El. Not Yahweh, not Adonai, as we have seen in the previous Psalms. Even in Psalm 8, it's Yahweh Adonai, Adonenu, Yahweh our Lord. But in this case, it's just the most general term El that means simply deity, divinity, a divine being, a god, or just the god in monotheistic sense. And then again, some commentators notice that it's quite striking contrast is that the psalm starts with this El generalizing word for God and then turns to the law of God, to the law of Yahweh. And it's again this combination of local Israelite religion that has, with its monotheism, has the claim to universality, to the recognition that the God that has given us the law is the same God that has created heavens and earth, or vice versa, the God that created heavens and earth has descended to us, chose us as a single people, his favorite people, and gave us the book, the revelation, the law. It works both ways. If we look at the psalm verse by verse, we should say that it starts with kind of liturgical setting of the universe. Whole universe is seen as a liturgical ritual, a ritual in which the glory of God, the central notion, the central idea of ancient temple cult is manifested. So the glory of God is this kavod. It's a Hebrew term which meant something substantial, something heavy, like the real representation, the real manifestation of God, and was often portrayed in the Bible as a thick cloud descending from heaven and settling down on the place where God is present. And in this, for example, during the travels in the desert with Moses and the tent of the covenant, it is the cloud that uh, escorts, so to speak, the Israelite people through the desert. And remember, again, it's Near East, and the clouds are not something common in the desert. Over Sinai Peninsula, the clouds are not like in the United northern countries like Ukraine or the US, that we can have clouds every day, 7 times changing, and rain, from rain to hail, from hail to good weather. But there it's clear sky for months and months and the cloud is seen as something extraordinary. It's something that it normally should not be here, but it's here. And this cloud goes through the desert with them. And then when Solomon builds the temple, it says that the cloud has descended upon this building, upon this structure, and with the cloud descending, the glory of God has inhabited or indwelt the temple. So this glory of God is always something palpable. It's not just an idea of Gloria Dei, like abstract idea, like in European mentality, a Western world mentality, but something that you can actually touch and smell, and it has some form. Of course, it goes way beyond it. It's transcendental. It's understood. It's not idolatrous. It's not reduced to a fog or something, steam. But it is also something that is manifestly physical. And the people who are experts in Hebrew language, they say that this word glory of God, kabod, is etymologically connotes something heavy, something substantial. And the opening of the psalm is that whole universe becomes a place of the revelation, manifestation of God's glory in the same manner, just zoomed out, as the Jerusalem temple is the adobe of God's glory. So the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims the work of his hands. Day unto day pours forth speech, and night unto night proclaims knowledge. With this sign here, I always want to emphasize parallelism, that this part of the verse is paralleled with this part of the verse, and this with that. In this case, the parallelism is very elaborate, and it's also very telling, because it's repeating, it's as if repeating the same thing in other words, but every time it repeats it in other words, it also discloses another facet of meaning. So here, the heavens is paralleled with the firmament, and these are two perfectly biblical terms. Heavens is obvious, and
Jesus Christ, Father.
And
well, how are you?
Excuse me, we can hear you. Can you mute, please? I think, Robert, can you mute, please, your conversation? Okay. Okay, so firmament is a standard word that is used in the creation story in Genesis to describe heavens, to emphasize that it is something like the roof of the building. So behind this, there is an image of the earth as the house, a building in which human beings and other living creatures are protected from the destructive chaos of the rest of the world. So we would say from the space, but this idea of protective cover, protective roof is expressed in this language of firm layer of creation that covers the earthly world on the top. So both the heavens and firmament declare and proclaim glory of God and the work of his hands. Day unto day pours forth speech, and night unto night proclaims knowledge. Again, the experts in Hebrew say that this choice of verbs here is quite telling, because pours forth, it's a nice translation, by the way, because it also reflects this kind of fluid, liquid metaphor behind the word. But the Hebrew word has this almost like a connotation of stream of water, a small current of water coming out of a source. Bubbling sound of water as it gushes from a spring, they say. And the word that is translated here as proclaims, is hard to translate it otherwise, actually connotes whispering sound of wind. So again, the Hebrew or in Aramaic, it has this kind of sound that as a wind. And commentators referred here to the Jesus saying in the Gospel of John that when he speaks with Nicodemus, he says that in the 3rd chapter of John, verse 8, he says, "The wind blows where it wills, and you hear the sound of it, but you do not know whence it comes and whither it goes." So it was obviously in the habitual language of the Hebrew Bible to speak of the wind as a specific sound that whispers in your ears. Someone needs to mute your microphone because I'm hearing all the time some strange sound. Can you please do that? I don't know who.
As host, I think you can just mute them.
Yeah, I need, but I think I can mute. I have to mute each
there you go.
individual. Yeah, I did it. Thank you. Okay, that's it. And what is important in this verses is this silent witness of the created nature, that it's not well, it will be developed in the next verse, so let's read it. "There are no tongues nor words in which their voices are not heard. Their sound has gone forth into all the earth, and their words into the ends of the world." Translation from the Greek can be a little bit confusing here, but there are other possible translations, like this one from Hebrew. "There is no speech, nor there are words. Their voice is not heard." So what the verse simply is saying that the heavens are always silent. We don't hear how the stars move or how the moon goes through the sky or the sun. Even this great giant, which will be described in the next verses, they don't make any noise. And still, by their quiet, silent existence, they are the best witness to the greatness, to the magnificence of the Creator who created them. Another possible reading based on Greek text with a slightly different twist is, "There is no speech or language where their voices are not heard." There is no speech or language in which their voices are not heard, meaning that again their silent voices are heard in every, are kind of resonate in every language of the world, in every culture, in every human community. Because often terms like speech and language, they designate in biblical language not only speech and language per se, but the carriers of those speeches and languages, so people who actually use them. So maybe in this reading that would mean that this silent witness of creation of heavens, sky, and so on is reflected in every culture, in every human community. It's not limited to the Israelites or to any other religious group, but it has this universal appeal. If so, that would well play with the next verse, saying that this witness has gone into the end of the earth, and their words unto the ends of the world. And those of you who are well familiar with Byzantine liturgy will see that it is exactly this verse that is used often in our services as a prokimenon, as a small kind of responsorial psalm verse for specific feasts. Would anyone be able to tell which ones? There are some chanters, I think, and some deacons in our group. You should know that.
I'd say their sound has gone forth into all the earth.
Yes.
And it's for fathers of the church and confessors, I think.
No.
No?
No.
Apostles?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Apostles, and because they were sent by Jesus to preach, and so